The lights come up before anyone moves. Hollywood, late 1948. A private screening room inside RKO. The air is warm from the projector, dust still floating where the beam had been cutting through the dark. Upholstered seats, heavy curtains, no windows, the kind of room designed so nothing leaves it unless someone allows it to. Howard Hughes doesn't turn right away. He stays facing the screen, one leg crossed over the other, hands folded loosely, as if he's still watching the last frame burn out. Behind him in the executive row, a handful of men sit frozen in the half-light. RKO President N. Peter Rathvon, Studio Counsel, two men no one introduces who never speak in meetings, whose names don't appear on memos. Hughes's security, his research men. No one clears their throat. No one shuffles paper. They're waiting for notes, that's the ritual. After a screening, the owner talks, the studio listens. It's usually about packing, or tone, or whether a scene plays in Des Moines. This time Hughes smiles. It's small, almost polite. Then he turns in his seat and says calmly, as if asking for a cup of coffee, "I'd like her phone records." The sentence lands without volume, no emphasis, no anger. Just a request. For half a second, no one reacts, because no one is sure they heard him correctly. Rathvon's eyes flick sideways, not to Hughes but to the counsel beside him, checking if this is procedural, if this is even possible. Hughes doesn't repeat himself. He doesn't need to. The lead actress's name is never spoken. It doesn't have to be. Everyone in the room knows exactly who her is. The woman whose face just filled the screen for 90 minutes, whose contract they negotiated, whose public image the studio carefully packages as wholesome, controllable, safe. Phone records aren't about money. They're about patterns. Who she calls. Who calls her back. When. How often. And who stops calling suddenly. The counsel shifts in his seat, just slightly, enough to be noticed. He opens his mouth, then closes it again. This isn't a legal objection moment, this is something else, something quieter. Hughes waits, still smiling. This is the first lesson. Power doesn't announce itself. It asks. One of the men in the back row nods once. No words, no questions, just acknowledgement, the kind that means the work has already begun. Rathvon finally speaks, carefully choosing a tone that won't escalate. Howard, that's unusual. Hughes tilts his head, the smile doesn't disappear but it cools. So is ownership, he says. That's it. No threat, no explanation, no justification. The room understands the shift instantly. This isn't about a single actress. This is about a rule change, about what happens now that Howard Hughes doesn't just finance pictures or influence boards. He owns the machinery. The screen behind him is blank now, white, waiting, a surface with nothing projected on it, which somehow feels worse. No one mentions privacy, or reputation, or the press. Those are studio concerns. This is something more intimate, more dangerous, information that doesn't need to be public to be effective. Hughes leans back, crossing his arms, gaze drifting not to Rathvon but past him, toward the door, toward the corridor outside the room, toward places no one in Hollywood ever sees. The message is clear without being said. This doesn't stop at the screening room. The meeting ends without ceremony. Chairs slide back softly. No one raises their voice. Hughes leaves first, he always does. The others wait until the door closes behind him before exhaling. No one jokes on the way out. Within days, the request becomes action. Not through RKO letterhead, not through studio channels, through quiet calls, private exchanges, third-party favors, the kind of work that doesn't create paperwork. Phone records in 1948 aren't digital. They're physical. Paper trails guarded by telephone companies that know exactly who they're allowed to say no to. And Howard Hughes is not on that list. The actress isn't told. There's no confrontation, no warning, nothing to push against. That's part of the design. The pressure doesn't arrive as force, it arrives as inevitability. At first, nothing changes. Her calls continue, her schedule remains intact. Sets are built, costumes fitted, smiles maintained for the press. That's how control works best. When it waits. Inside RKO, people begin to notice small adjustments. Scripts delayed, meetings postponed, A call that used to be returned in an hour now takes a day, then two. Someone in casting hesitates before confirming her next project. No one says why. No one has to. Because everyone knows what files do once they exist. They don't need to be opened, their presence alone is enough. Howard Hughes doesn't threaten careers publicly, he doesn't shout, he doesn't blacklist with speeches, he lets people imagine the consequences themselves. And imagination is more efficient than force. Weeks later, Rathbun hears a rumor, not from Hughes, never from Hughes, from a middleman, a whisper passed carefully, stripped of emotion. The records were detailed, more detailed than expected. Rathbun doesn't ask what that means, he doesn't want to know, because knowing creates responsibility, and responsibility is dangerous. By the end of the year, the actress's leverage is gone, not overnight, not dramatically, just enough that she feels it, just enough that she adjusts her behavior without being told to. That's the quiet victory. Howard Hughes never brings up the screening again, never references the request, never explains his interest. But inside RKO, something irreversible has happened. A new rule has been introduced, not written, not voted on, not announced. From now on, talent isn't protected by contracts alone. It's managed by information. And the people who understand that survive. The ones who don't never quite know why things stopped working for them. The request is never mentioned again. That's how everyone knows it worked. In Hollywood, when a powerful demand fails, it echoes. It creates arguments, memos, damage control. When it succeeds, it disappears into routine, absorbed so completely that no one can point to the moment it became normal. Inside RKO, the first change isn't visible on screen, it's in behavior. Phones ring differently now. Assistants listen longer before responding. Conversations end sooner than they used to. Names aren't said unless necessary. People learn quickly that what Howard Hughes asked for in that screening room wasn't an exception. It was a demonstration. The actress notices the shift before anyone explains it. She doesn't hear accusations. She isn't summoned. No one warns her. Instead, doors that once opened easily begin to resist. A meeting gets rescheduled. A script she was verbally promised stalls in legal review. Her agent, usually confident, starts speaking in careful half-sentences. "It's complicated right now," he says. "Complicated how?" she asks. He doesn't answer directly, he never will. Because the pressure isn't designed to be discussed, it's designed to be felt. Howard Hughes understands something most studio heads don't. Public conflict creates allies, silence creates isolation. If no one tells you what you did wrong, you start editing yourself, you reduce risk, you remove people from your life without being told to. And slowly the problem solves itself. Inside Hughes's private circle, information begins to move the way money used to, quietly, selectively, without receipts. The research men are not investigators in the legal sense. They don't interrogate, they don't confront, they observe, they collect. Phone logs, travel overlaps, names repeated too often, connections that look innocent until someone decides they are. In 1948, America is tense. Anti-communist paranoia is becoming policy. Loyalty isn't a belief anymore, it's a performance. And Hughes understands how easily personal information can be reframed as political risk. That's the unspoken layer of the phone records. Who calls you late at night matters. Who stops calling matters more. At RKO, executives begin asking themselves a question they've never had to ask before. What does Howard Hughes know about me? Not what he said. Not what he's threatened. What he could say if he wanted to. That uncertainty changes everything. Meetings become quieter, decisions take longer. No one challenges Hughes directly, not because he's volatile but because he's unreadable. His calm is more unsettling than anger. You can prepare for anger, you can't prepare for curiosity. One executive tries carefully to push back, not about the actress, about process. He suggests formalizing requests, creating boundaries, a framework. Hughes listens, nods, smiles. And never schedules that executive again. No firing, no demotion, just absence. Meetings happen without him, decisions are made elsewhere. His authority drains slowly, invisibly, until one day he realizes he's no longer central. That's the consequence no one writes down. The actress begins changing her routines. She calls fewer people, shorter conversations. She avoids certain names entirely, not because she's been warned, but because something in the air tells her to. That's when the fear becomes internal. The most effective control doesn't require enforcement, it rewires behavior. Hughes doesn't need to act again, the system is already adjusting around him. Rumors circulate quietly across studios, not headlines, not gossip columns, private warnings exchanged in hallways and parking lots. He keeps files. He doesn't forget. He doesn't argue. Those phrases spread faster than facts ever could. The phone records themselves may never be used explicitly, that's the brilliance of it. Their value isn't in exposure, it's in potential. A sealed envelope on a desk is often more powerful than an open one. By early 1949, agents begin steering clients away from anything that could be misread. Friendships become liabilities, associations are weighed, not morally, strategically. Howard Hughes has introduced a new currency into Hollywood. Fear without fingerprints. RKO, once loud with competing egos, becomes cautious. People speak less in groups, more in pairs. Even then, they lower their voices, not because they're being watched, but because they might be. The screening room moment never appears in any memoir. It's too small, too deniable, too clean, but its effect ripples outward, altering how power is understood. Control doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs to be precise. Late one night, the actress asks her agent a direct question, the kind professionals avoid. Did he do this? The agent pauses, too long. That's not how I'd think about it, he says. Which is as close to confirmation as she'll ever get. Because once you accept that someone has access to your private patterns, the question isn't what they'll do. It's when. And that waiting becomes the punishment. Howard Hughes never calls her, never writes, never meets. He doesn't need proximity. Distance is safer. Distance keeps the fear abstract. An abstract fear lasts longer. Years later, no one can point to the exact moment it ended. That's the problem. There is no scandal, no headline, no confrontation that can be dated or quoted, just a slow erosion so gradual it feels natural while it's happening. By the early 1950s, the actress is still working, still visible, still respected. On paper, nothing was taken from her, but something fundamental has shifted. Her choices are narrower now, her leverage thinner. She finds herself agreeing more quickly, asking fewer questions. She doesn't know what's in the file. She only knows it exists. And that knowledge reshapes her entire professional life. Howard Hughes, meanwhile, never revisits the subject. He doesn't need to. He has moved on to other acquisitions, other interests, other obsessions. That's another lesson embedded in the fear. Power doesn't linger, it collects and advances. At RKO, the screening room becomes just another room again. New films, new faces, new executives, but the memory stays embedded in behavior. Even when Hughes is absent, his method remains. People still hesitate before speaking. Still measure their words. Still assume that somewhere, somehow, someone is listening. The men who witnessed the request never describe it publicly, not because they signed anything, not because they were threatened, but because admitting it would mean admitting how easily they complied. And that's harder to live with. As years pass, Hollywood evolves, the blacklist hardens, loyalty oaths become standard, studios collapse and merge. Hughes becomes more isolated, more reclusive, more myth than man. But the technique he demonstrated doesn't disappear with him. It spreads. Information becomes leverage, silence becomes strategy, power stops needing to shout. Long after Hughes sells RKO, executives who never met him still operate under the logic he normalized. Background checks deepen, personal lives are quietly evaluated, not officially, never officially. Always deniable. The actress eventually leaves Hollywood, not in disgrace, not in exile, just away. Her exit is described as a personal choice, a change of priorities, a desire for privacy. That word again. Privacy. Years later, in a rare conversation, she tells a friend something she's never said publicly. Her voice is calm, almost detached. I learned that contracts protect your work, she says. But files protect their power. She never mentions Hughes by name. She doesn't have to. Howard Hughes dies in 1976. Alone, unreachable, surrounded by sealed documents, locked rooms, and unanswered questions, obituaries focus on his genius, his eccentricity, his wealth. They don't mention the screening room. They don't mention the phone records. Because history prefers visible violence, it understands explosions, courtrooms, public betrayals. It struggles with moments like this, quiet, procedural, polite. A man smiling in the dark, asking for something no one thought he should have. And a room full of people realizing that the rules had already changed. The fear wasn't in what happened next. It was in what didn't happen. No argument. No refusal. No record of resistance. Just a calm request carried out. And a lesson Hollywood never forgot. Some power doesn't announce itself. It waits for you to adjust. And once you do, it never has to speak again.